Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Touchpoint Group Insight session. We're looking at the US banks, and today Tony is going to take us through another perspective of how you can look at your data and the feedback that your customers are giving you. Now, overarching scores and rankings and everything like that is one thing, but what Tony's going to do is just highlight how you can actually dig a little bit deeper and that 1, 2, 3, or even 4 layers down to uncover what experiences with what parts of your app that your customers are having that can either negatively drag that experience down or positively reflect the great experience that they're having, and then how you can then use that data to prioritize your focus on app enhancements over the coming months. Tony, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, great introduction, because I think that's really important to understand is that the high-level score is interesting, but that's as far as it goes. You need to then go down to that detail to make those decisions. So today we're looking at these three key areas: US nationals, US tier ones, and US regionals. So let's just jump in and look at our normal perspective on what we cover to start with. So we do normally look at this. We normally look at the actual scores across time. So this is the past 12 months, how these scores have been moving. Now, one of the important things I like to reiterate here is that this is what we call our engaged customer score. So these are customers who've given both a score and a comment in either the App Store or the Android store. What's important there is if we see any movements here, up or down, we know exactly why, because everyone who's part of that contribution to that movement has given us some comments in there. So we know why things have moved. Even the smallest movement of a 0.1 movement, we can be really clear about what's actually happened. So that's really important. And the reason that's really important is the purpose of looking at this is to make decisions. So if something has moved down, you can then go away and understand that detail underneath these things as to why that's moved, so you can make changes to improve that score. So here, just briefly, I'm looking across the market here. We can see US Bank is still doing very well, sitting above 4.75. I won't look at that in too much detail. But there's two at the bottom here. One is PNC, and that seems to be doing reasonably well, gets above 4 sometimes, then drops down below 3.5. So inconsistency for PNC is part of the problem. They do pick things back up reasonably quickly, but that inconsistency is sort of causing a problem for customers there. The other one, which also, as you can see, is inconsistent, is Truist. So a bit of a jump up and down. We see there in November the decline and then the pick up again. So that's great, but that inconsistency is not. It's in the past they've been a lot better at making those improvements consistently. So they need to watch out there as well. We'll look in a bit more detail later at Capital One and some others as well. Let's have a look at the US nationals. So one of the big standouts here is USAA, where there's been a drop in from about 3, sitting about 2 on average. So we're going to have a look into as to why that's happened. So what makes them different to others? What makes that such a problem for them to overcome? Another one is looking at, you can see there are a few sort of movements going around. We can see that Wells Fargo is sitting up there nicely. They've dropped it down again in March. So just a brief look at what's going on in the market. And Chase has also picked up. So they've actually went below 3. They've picked up over the past 3 to 4 months and doing pretty well there. Okay, let's look at, this is our US regionals. And Fifth, I won't dwell too much on Fifth. We've talked about this before about UI issues and things like that. But again, they need to turn things around. I was hoping to have this turned around in February. It's still low now. So Fifth Third, if you want to reach out and get to some underlying detail around this, just reach out. So another one is also TD, which has dropped in October and continues to remain below that 3 level. And in fact, it's the lowest it's been over the past 12 months and way back beyond that at around 2.5. So some issues going on there. So what I want to look at is a few particular banks to compare and contrast. So I picked a few here. So we talked about USAA, and we'll focus on that. We'll also have a look at Capital One, which is doing reasonably well, but it's sort of flattened off from its peak in the middle of end of last year, which was hitting near 4.5. So some issues there. Discover Financial as well. Now we see here the first time it's dropped away below that 4 level in a very long time. So what's going on there? Let's have a look. And also we'll have a look at those inconsistencies from P&C. So let's quickly jump forward and get into that straight away. Okay, one of the first views we'd like to look at is this area we like to call our SURF analysis. So looking at security authentication, usability, reliability, and functionality. One of the things about this score is you want to get this frequency as low as possible. You want to have those scores down because these are problems. For example, reliability, we can see that this is the latest month, this is March, at 46% of the feedback for USAA was about reliability. So clearly that's just overwhelming the conversation coming through from customers and overwhelming the experience that's going on. And this often flows through to things like things not working. The whole usability is an issue as well. And also logging in is also a problem for them. So that's interesting. But what's the impact of that though? So I can see, yeah, that's interesting, 46%. But what does it do in terms of my impact to my score? What I'm doing here is what's called contribution. It's just showing the impact of that particular thing on issues with reliability on my overall score. So we can see there for USAA, their score is being dragged backwards by around 1 point. 1 whole point out of 5 is about reliability. So even if they got to the level that P&C is, they could gain 0.7. That's the gap between this 1 and the 0.3. So they can gain 0.7 by this, just getting that reliability in order. Of course, they'd be aware of this. That reliability issue would be feeding through in their system. They'd know what's going on. But what they don't understand, there's also things happening underneath that. There's also journeys not working and things like that for customers. So a reasonably big problem for them to overcome. We can see there, though, that sort of the second level that P&C could also improve. They need to pick themselves up as well because they're sort of at twice the level of impact than Capital One and Discover Financial. So let's step forward again and just look at USAA and the history it's had across the past year. So again, these are issues, and we know they've had that their scores been dropping across time. And the reason it's dropping is because all of these issues are actually building across time as well. So again, that just shows as your score is going down, these types of issues are the ones that are going to be driving that score. What I will do though is have a look. Let's have a look at Q1 for USAA. What we're looking at here is some detail. So Q1 they've actually increased slightly, but what I'd like to do here is actually get to some detail as to how they compare to others. Let's look at some functionality issues. So 41% of USAA customers are talking about some sort of functionality issues. That's gone up 1.5 points in Q1. But let's have a look at some detail underneath that. So if I look at one here called poor app payment feature, that's actually slightly improved. It's gone from about 8 or 9 down to about 6. But how does that 6% of people with issues compare to others? Let's just jump in and do a bit of benchmarking here and see how it compares to others. So we saw that 6.1. Of the 18 banks we have in this particular data set, 6.1 is the largest by far. It's actually double TD, and the average is about 1.7. So about 4 times the level of average is USAA. So clearly some problems there for them to overcome. And even if I click through a few other things, for example, let's look at one here. So poor app money transfer, how is that going? So they've got 9.4% of customers. So 1 in 10 are talking about some issue with poor app money transfer. And that, if we look at this list here, is well above the average as well. So the average is 3.3. They're about 3 times that level. So clearly some issues there for USAA to overcome. So let's not dwell too much on USAA now. Let's move forward and have a look at someone else. So this one here, I'll just look at my filters and show you. This is the latest month for Discover Financial, and we saw their score had dropped. And we can see that reflected here as well. We can see their score is 4.2. It's gone down to 3.9. So a 0.3 drop. So it's reasonably substantial from the historical levels they've been at. So first of all, we see reliability is 14%. It's gone up by about 4%. So it was about 10% in February. It's gone up to 14% in March. Similarly for functionality, about 10, it's gone up to 12. So clearly some issues going on for them as well. So let's have a look at a few other things sitting in here. Let's look at, so for example, what's in here? So this is interesting, this one here, poor app alerts and notification. It's gone up 0.6, which means it pretty much was non-existent before. It's gone up from 0.1 to 0.7. Poor app alerts and notifications. So this is looking at just Discover Financial in March. So here, even though someone's given you a 5, if an issue with your push notifications, push notifications never work, the app is slow, getting push notifications to work is a hassle. So clearly some push notification issues coming through for Discover Financial and need to improve there. So getting down to that detail is really important, and lots of other things have got going on here as well they could also improve on. So one last piece here is what I'm going to look at here is looking at particular topics around customer journeys. So this is looking at, I'll put this in terms of the average score here. This is looking at the 4 focus areas here of USAA, Capital One, Discover Financial, and PNC, and just seeing what's their score across these particular journeys. Now, for example, I can see here, there's one here called Paying Bills via the app. The score for USAA is 1.8. But what does that mean? What does 1.8 mean to me in terms of my overall scores? What I can do again, we looked at this at the start, look at this thing called contribution, which shows me how does that impact my score? How does going bad here impact my score? What I can see is it's minus 0.14. This particular thing, paying bills via the app, which seems like a very straightforward thing, is dragging the score back for USAA by 0.14. And clearly others are doing well at this, so they can show there's actually a way to improve here or a path forward. And just getting down to some very quick detail before I close off here. So basic stuff, unable to pay my USAA credit card bill. All my pending bill payments just disappeared. I'm tempted to change providers. Paying my bills so frustrating. So this frustration obviously leads to people leaving. And if this is the channel they want to use, then clearly they'll have to move elsewhere if these types of problems are going on. Thank you, Glenn.
Some great insights there. Thank you, Tony. And it is amazing how easy it is to drill down and uncover that granular data when you know where to look. So if you want access to this sort of information, if you want us to give you a walkthrough in regards to your bank, feel free to sing out, and we're more than happy to spend a little bit of time giving you some insights in regards to how your bank is performing in these areas as well. Have a great day, folks.